Hello, this video is on lesson 3.2 where we will write quadratic functions, and specifically we want to write the functions in vertex form. This lesson begins on page 133. Now we are talking about quadratic functions. Now quadratic functions, the shape of its graph is in the form of a parabola. And parabolas, they always have a vertex. And what we want to do is, if we are given the vertex of a parabola, which is again hk, and we are given a point on the parabola, just any random point on the parabola, using those two pieces of information, we can find what the vertex form of the quadratic function is. Alright, so how do we begin? Alright, let's say for example the vertex that it gives us is -1, 5, and the point is 0, 8. What we want to do is first find h and k. So as you can see, h is going to be -1, k is going to be 5, and my point is 0, 8, so that means that x is 0, and remember that y can also be called f of x, and so f of x is going to be 8. Now in order to find our vertex form of the quadratic function, all I need to do is take hk, x, and f of x and plug it into this form right here. So let's go ahead and begin. So let me write the function here again. F of x equals a x minus h squared plus k. Alright, first of all, I want to plug in f of x. Again, f of x is 8, so I just plug in 8. Now notice we don't know what a is, so I'm just going to write a. X is going to be 0. H is going to be -1, but remember, h is the only variable that when we plug in, it's always going to be the opposite sign. So the opposite of -1 is going to be +1. So always keep in mind, h is always the opposite. Okay, we square it and then plus k. K is going to be the same number that we see there, 5. Alright. So we took all the information, we took h, k, x, f of x, and plugged it into this formula right here. Notice that the only variable that we have here is a, and that's what we want to solve for. So we can go ahead and begin simplifying by beginning inside the parentheses. 0 plus 1 is basically 1 squared plus 5. 1 squared is basically 1 times 1, which is 1 a. Now look at what I did here. I just basically took the 1 and wrote it first and then followed by the a plus 5. And as you can see, we simplified this. Now we can go ahead and solve for a. We subtract 5 on both sides. 8 minus 5 is 3, which is equal to a. A is equal to 3. We still have that 1 there, but we don't need to write it down. We find that a is equal to 3. So finally, since we found a, we can write the final vertex form of the quadratic function. And what we need to do is just plug in a, h, and k. So my final answer is going to be f of x is equal to a is equal to 3, which is what we just solved. X, h, again, we always do the opposite for h. So the opposite of -1 is +1, so x plus 1 squared plus k, which is 5. And there we go. This is going to be my final answer. So can you see how we took the vertex? We took the vertex and we took a point, to find the vertex form of the quadratic function. Now, what if, for example, it does not give us the vertex, instead it gives us 2 points on the parabola, and it gives us the axis of symmetry. Now remember, the axis of symmetry actually tells us what h is. So how do we find the vertex form of the quadratic function if we just have 2 points and h, which we get from the axis of symmetry? So let's go ahead and begin. First thing we want to do is, since we know that we can get h from the axis of symmetry, h is going to be 3. And since we have these 2 points on the parabola, we're going to have 2 equations. So remember, the first one we called x. 1 is going to be my x value, and 9 is going to be my f of x. And on the other point, 4 is going to be my x, and 3 is going to be my f of x. So now I can begin setting up the 2 equations. So first of all, let's use this point and set up the equation. F of x is going to be 9 is equal to a. We don't know what a is. X is going to be 1. And h, remember, we're always taking the opposite sign of h. So here we have positive 3. That means we're going to have negative 3 squared plus k. We don't know what k is. So here's my first equation. Let's set up the second equation. Again, we're going to use this point here. This time my f of x is 3 is equal to a. 4 is going to be x. Again, h is always going to be my opposite value, which is negative 3 squared plus k. Here's my second equation. Alright, what I need to do now is simply simplify, just like we did in the previous example. So let's go and simplify this. We have 9 equals a. 1 minus 3 is basically negative 2 squared plus k. Now every time we have the square of a negative number, it's going to become positive. Negative 2 squared is basically positive 4. And what I like to do is write the 4 at the beginning, followed by the variable. So 4a. So a's negative 2 squared is basically 4a plus k. There, we simplified it. Now let's go ahead and simplify this. 3 is equal to a. What is 4 minus 3? Well, that's 1 squared. Or that's basically 1, and then we have the squared on the outside plus k. And this simplifies to 3 equals 1a plus k, because 1 squared is basically 1. Alright, we simplified both of the equations. So what am I going to do with both of these? Well, basically what I'm going to do is subtract both of them. So I'm going to take a look at my 4a and my a. Which one is larger? The 4a. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this equation first because it has the larger a plus k, and then I'm going to write this underneath it. 3 is equal to 1a plus k. And now I'm just going to subtract both of these equations. And it's pretty easy. 9 minus 3, well, that's 6. 4a minus a is going to be 3a. And then finally k minus k, well, that's 0. And so take a look at what we have left. 6 is equal to 3a. We can go ahead and solve for a now. So if we divide both sides by 3, we're going to get that 6 divided by 3 is 2, and we have a is equal to 2. what we can do now is take any of these two equations and plug it in here for A, or we can plug it in here. It doesn't matter which one you use, you'll get the same answer. So let's actually do both of them. So if I take this equation, I get 9 is equal to 4. I'm going to plug in 2 in for A plus K. So I get 9 is equal to 8 plus K. 4 times 2 is 8. To solve for K, I need to subtract both sides by 8, and I get 1 is equal to K. There we go, that's the answer. If we do the other one, take 3 is equal to 1, K is, or A is equal to 2, so 1 times 2 plus K. This becomes 3 equals to 2 times 1, which is 2, and then plus K, subtract 2 from both sides, we get 1 is equal to K again. So it does not matter which equation you use, you should get the same answer. Alright, now that I have that K is equal to 1 and A is equal to 2, I can now go ahead and write my final answer. And again, to write my final answer, all I want to do is plug in A, H, and K. And so my final answer is going to be f of x is equal to A, which is 2, x minus h. Again, h is always going to be the opposite sign, which is, in this case, we have positive 3. The opposite is negative 3 squared. And then finally k, which we found to be 1. So we have plus 1. Here is my final answer. So can you see how we took 2 points on the parabola and the axis of symmetry in order to find my vertex form of the quadratic function? And that's basically, these two examples that we just did are basically what lesson 3.2 is about. The first one, you're given the vertex and a point on the parabola to find the quadratic function in vertex form, and the second problem is you're given 2 points on the parabola and the axis of symmetry to find the vertex form. Alright, thank you for watching.